In today's travel and aviation industry, passengers' reviews can make the difference between a good and a bad reputation for an airline. Of the many global airlines, a select few are recognized as being the best in the world when it comes to its passenger services. Of those airlines, Asian carriers have routinely been recognized for being among the best in the world. Then there's a discussion of being the best of the best, which Singapore Airlines stands out with its Skytrax 5-star rating and being named TripAdvisor's best airline for 2019. If there's a standard for luxury in aviation, Singapore Airlines could be in that discussion. Well known for luxury and service, its history follows the rise of Singapore as an independent nation and a regional economic power. Prior to the foundation of Singapore as an independent nation, both Singapore and Malaysia were under British rule, with one airline serving the two territories. The airline, named Malayan Airways Limited, was founded on May 1, 1947, operating flights mostly within the region of Malaya, Indonesia, and Borneo. During its first 20 years of operation, the airline saw two name changes, notably in 1963, when Singapore, along with the nearby provinces, formed the Federation of Malaysia, and the combined airline was renamed Malaysian Airways. The second renaming of the airline followed Singapore's split from the Federation of Malaysia in 1966, when it was renamed Malaysia Singapore Airlines. Along with the split and Singapore being a new, young independent nation, the airline would eventually end operations in 1972. On that date, two prominent airlines of the region would form: Malaysian Airlines, known as Malaysia Air Systems, and Singapore Airlines. As part of the split, Malaysian Airlines would focus more on the domestic side, while Singapore Airlines kept the company headquarters in Singapore and kept the Boeing 737s and 707s the airline had. While Singapore is a very small, tiny independent nation, the newly established Singapore Airlines set its sights for international flights. As Singapore Airlines launched its international routes, the airline's female flight attendants would continue to wear the traditional Malayan sarong kebaya uniforms, which would later be updated, and the airline's flight attendants would be known as the Singapore Girl. The Singapore Girl would be used in marketing and advertising campaigns for the airline around the world, as Singapore Airlines welcomed new aircraft such as the 727s, DC-10s, and the 747 to its fleet. The airline would launch its first transcontinental flights to Europe and North America in the 1970s, along with the introduction of in-flight entertainment for passengers. Along with the in-flight entertainment systems, Singapore Airlines would be among the first airlines to offer choices of meals and drinks in economy class. As Singapore Airlines opened new, longer routes with larger aircraft, not all of the early endeavors for the airline has gone on smoothly. With an interest in supersonic travel, Singapore Airlines partnered with British Airways to operate a flight between Singapore and London using the Concorde in 1977. The lone Concorde had two paint liveries of two airlines, Singapore Airlines on one side and British Airways on the other, and it operated flights between Singapore and London via Bahrain. However, while it offered supersonic travel, both the Indian and Malaysian governments had noise complaints about the flight, and the service was discontinued in 1980. Those attempts at supersonic travel would eventually lead to failure. The 80s and the 90s would turn out to be some of the best years for Singapore Airlines, starting with its move to the newly opened Singapore Changi Airport in 1981. Flights would start to Los Angeles, and the airline would acquire the first of its few Airbus aircraft, including the Airbus A300s and the A310s. In 1989, Singapore Airlines launched a regional subsidiary called Tradewinds Airlines, which would later become Silk Air. Into the 1990s, Singapore Airlines would look for ways to improve its in-flight offerings with updated in-flight entertainment and dining options. It was also during this time that Singapore Airlines continued to innovate with its introduction of satellite phones and the airline's website. Singapore Airlines would eventually launch its own frequent flyer program called KrisFlyer, and the airline would become a member of the Star Alliance in 2000. Singapore Airlines would continue to improve its in-flight offerings, with being the first airline to offer audio-video on-demand system for in-flight entertainment. While known for luxury, Singapore Airlines was already taking steps to enhance its image as a long-haul airline, as it pushed the limitations of modern long-haul aircraft with new flights to Singapore, to Los Angeles, and Newark in the United States. Having the distinction of the longest flight in the world, the Singapore-Newark flights took about 18 hours long, depending on wind conditions. While the route was a crowning achievement, the use of the Airbus A340-500 and the cost to cover the route made it economically not viable, and the route was discontinued in 2013. However, on the bright side, the airline would resume the route 5 years later. This was made possible as the airline invested in new long-haul aircraft such as the Airbus A350 and the Airbus A380 Super Jumbo, with the A350 being used on the relaunch of the route in 2018. Singapore Airlines continued to be a pioneer in long-haul aviation, with being the launch customer of the Airbus A380. However, between the early 2000s and the present, Singapore Airlines, along with its regional competitors, have been facing the challenge from low-cost carriers that have emerged, which has really cut into the market share of many of the airlines in the region. To cater to the growing budget travel market from Singapore, Singapore Airlines launched its own low-cost carrier named Scoot in 2011, and recently announced it would merge its Silk Air brand into the Singapore Airlines company in 2018. Along with its Silk Air and Scoot brands, Singapore Airlines is looking for ways to increase its revenue through new regional and technological ventures. Singapore Airlines has invested heavily into India-based Vistara Airlines, which is a joint venture between the Tata Sons Company of India and Singapore Airlines, as well as announcing a new initiative to invest in new technologies to enhance its in-flight and overall experience. Among the new technologies the airline is looking into has been blockchain and artificial intelligence. Currently, Singapore Airlines is majority owned by the Singapore government via Temasek Holdings and serves flights to 64 destinations with 122 aircraft. While it does have one accident which will result in a loss of life, Singapore Airlines' safety record is among some of the best in the world when compared with other airlines. Along with being the launch customer of the Airbus A380 Super Jumbos, Singapore Airlines is the second largest operator of the Super Jumbos, with 19 currently in operation. Those jets have the attention of many frequent flyers, with its first-class suites, which resembles flying hotel rooms, which includes a bed, an LCD TV, and a leather seat. Singapore Airlines' rise as a world-renowned airline follows the city-state's rise from a territory of Britain, being a part of Malaysia, and its eventual independence and economic growth. Singapore has had to innovate and think for itself, which the results can be seen with Singapore being one of the richest countries in the world. That success and innovation has translated to make what Singapore Airlines is today. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a great day.